In my first life, my wife, Sarah, bled me dry for her brother. My best friend, Tom, helped her do it. And I died choking on my own despair in a hospital bed I couldn't afford. My final moments were a haze of fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and the crushing weight of knowing I had been systematically dismantled by the very people I'd built my world around. I had been a fool, a loving, trusting fool, and my reward was a lonely, bankrupt death. But then, the scent of jasmine tea, strong, floral, and slightly burnt, filled my nostrils. I blink. The harsh fluorescent lights are gone, replaced by the soft morning sun filtering through the cheap blinds of our kitchen. My kitchen. Our kitchen. The linoleum floor is cold beneath my bare feet. The old, sputtering coffee maker gurgles on the counter. It's all here, exactly as it was. My hand trembles as I reach for my phone on the worn Formica countertop. The screen glows to life, and the date stares back at me, a cruel joke I don't understand. March 15th, 3 years ago. 3 years to the day before I died. Then I see it. The notification from our joint bank account. My breath catches, a painful, sharp thing in my chest. I remember this notification. It's the first cut in a death by 1,000 cuts. Transaction alert. A transfer of $15,000 has been made from your anniversary fund account. The recipient, Dr. Chen's surgical center. Rage, cold and pure, floods my veins, chasing away the confusion. It's not a dream. It's not a memory. It's a second chance. The numbers on the screen blur, just as they had the first time, but the haze isn't from tears of confusion or panic. It's from a clarity so sharp it hurts. I know this script. I've lived it already. The floorboards creak behind me. Marcus? Honey, you're up early. I turn slowly. There she is. Sarah. My Sarah. Her hair is a messy halo around her head, her face etched with a practiced concern that I now see for the mask it is. Guilt radiates from her, so potent I can almost taste it. Her hands tremble as she clutches her favorite coffee mug, the one I bought her on our second anniversary. It's a masterful performance. Morning, I say, my voice surprisingly steady. She starts her speech, the same rehearsed monologue that had once broken my heart with its sincerity. Something's happened, baby. It's Jake. Her voice cracks on cue. He needs emergency surgery. Something with his appendix. It's ruptured, they said. It's really bad. In my first life, I had wrapped her in my arms. I had whispered that it would be okay, that we were a family, that her brother was my brother. I had told her not to worry about the money, that our Bali anniversary trip could wait, that Jake's health was all that mattered. This time, I watch her lips move, every syllable a familiar lie. I see the flicker of calculation in her eyes, the subtle tension in her jaw as she waits for my reaction. She's not worried about Jake. She's worried about whether I'll buy the story. I give a slow nod. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, watching her anxiety build. Then I give her the words she needs to hear. Of course, Sarah. Family first. The relief that washes over her face is sickening. It's not the relief of a sister whose brother will be saved. It's the relief of a con artist whose mark has just taken the bait. Oh, Marcus, she breathes, rushing forward to hug me. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. I let her hold me, my body rigid, my heart a stone in my chest. Her perfume, the one I used to love, now smells of deceit. I pat her back mechanically. Anything for your family, I say, the words tasting like ash. I remember everything. I remember this $15,000 was just the beginning. It was for Jake's gambling debts, not surgery. Dr. Chen wasn't a surgeon. He was a loan shark's enforcer. And this was only the first of many withdrawals from our future. At the office, The stale air of recycled ambition tastes the same. My cubicle is the same beige prison cell. The hum of computers is the same monotonous soundtrack to my slow demise. "Marcus, my man!" A heavy hand claps my shoulder, and I resist the urge to flinch. Tom, my best friend, my brother, in all but blood. His smile is wide, his eyes full of the same fake concern he'd shown me last time. "Heard about Jake," he says, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Tough break, man. Is he going to be okay?" "He'll pull through," I say, my tone flat. That's good. He leans against the cubicle wall. "But damn, man. That Bali trip. You guys had that planned for months. That must have put a dent in the savings." "There it is. The probing, the intelligence gathering. He's not concerned about me or Jake or the trip. He's confirming the money is gone. He's reporting back to the commander of this operation, my wife. In my first life, I had confided in him, lamented the lost trip, the financial strain. I had given him every piece of information they needed to plan their next move. "It's just money, Tom," I say, turning back to my monitor. "We'll manage." His eyes narrow for a fraction of a second, surprised by my stoicism. He expected distress, a vulnerability he could exploit. I give him nothing. He claps my shoulder again, a little too hard this time. "You're a good man, Marcus. Sarah's lucky to have you." The irony is so thick I could drown in it. He walks away, and I watch him go, the architect of my ruin alongside my wife. He was the one who introduced Sarah to her yoga instructor. He was the one who passed Jake's resume to my boss. He was the Judas at my last supper, and he did it all for a cut of the money, and, as I later found out, a chance with Sarah's divorced sister. The rage is a physical thing, a hot coil in my gut. But I push it down. Rage is an indulgence. What I need now is cold, hard currency. On my lunch break, I don't go to the sad little sandwich shop around the corner. I walk 3 blocks to a different bank, one where Sarah's name isn't on anything. I walk into the quiet, marble-floored lobby and head straight for the private banking offices. "Mr. Miller," a warm voice says. "It's been a while." Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman in her late 50s, greets me with a familiar smile. She handled the account my father set up for me before he died. An emergency fund he'd made me promise never to touch unless my world was ending. He'd told me to never even tell my wife about it. A piece of advice I'd once thought was cynical and paranoid. He was a better judge of character than I ever was. "Hello, Mrs. Rodriguez," I say. "I need to make a withdrawal." "Of course," she says, her expression professional, but her eyes holding a hint of concern. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is about to be," I reply. In her office, I sign the papers. I look at the account balance, a number that has been my secret safety net, untouched for years. $50,000. In my first life, I'd forgotten about it in the chaos, only remembering it when I was already too sick and too broken to access it. By then, Sarah, through a power of attorney she'd tricked me into signing, had found it and drained it too. It was the final nail in my coffin. This time it is my resurrection. "I'd like it all," I say. "In cash. Large, non-sequential bills." She raises an eyebrow but doesn't question me. She knows the history of this account. She knows it's for emergencies. She just doesn't know that I am the emergency. An hour later, I walk out with a heavy briefcase. The weight of the crisp bills feels like power. It feels like freedom. This money won't be used to pay for a con man's debts or fund my wife's affair. This money is my escape. This money will buy me a new life. That evening, the apartment smells of garlic and basil. Sarah is cooking my favorite pasta, a classic move from her playbook. She's wearing the blue dress I love. Her hair is down, and she's a perfect portrait of the devoted, loving wife. The performance is so good it's nauseating. She sets a plate in front of me, a glass of red wine beside it. She leans down and kisses my cheek. "I'm so grateful for you, Marcus," she whispers. I eat the pasta, each bite a reminder of the thousands of meals we shared, the life I thought was real. She watches me, her eyes soft. She's laying the groundwork for the next ask. "I spoke to the hospital," she says, swirling the wine in her glass. "Dr. Chen said there might be some complications. Jake might need additional procedures." She's testing the waters, seeing if the well is still open for drawing. In my first life. My heart had sunk. I had felt the cold dread of our savings slipping away. This time I look up from my plate and give her my most earnest, concerned expression. I reach across the table and take her hand. It's cold. "Whatever he needs, Sarah," I say, my voice full of manufactured devotion. "Don't you worry about the money. We'll find it. I'll work overtime. I'll sell my father's watch if I have to. Your brother's life is what's important." A single, perfect tear rolls down her cheek, a tear of triumph. She thinks she has me. She thinks her loving, gullible husband is ready to be sheared again. She squeezes my hand. "You're a saint, Marcus." "No," I say, smiling a cold, secret smile she can't see. "I'm just a man who loves his family." She goes to bed early, feigning exhaustion and stress. I stay in the living room, the briefcase with my future resting against my leg. I listen to the sounds of the city outside our window. I know this timeline. I know every move they will make. And I know that before the sun rises, I will be gone. They think they're playing a game with a fool. They don't know they're playing against a ghost who has already seen the end. My sister Linda's manicured nails tapped against her wine glass, a sharp, rhythmic click-click-click that sounded like tiny hammers against my skull. She always did that when she was about to dispense what she considered wisdom, a poisoned cocktail of condescension and self-interest. In my previous life, I had mistaken it for genuine concern. Now I recognized it as the overture to my vivisection. "Marcus, darling," she began, her voice a silken weapon, "I just worry about you. You're too trusting, too generous, especially with Sarah's family." We were at her house for the obligatory Sunday dinner. The air in her upscale, minimalist home was always thin and cold, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and quiet resentment. Her husband, David, a man whose spine seemed to have been surgically replaced with gelatin, nodded sagely from his armchair, swirling a brandy he couldn't afford. "With this whole situation with Jake," Linda continued, "it just highlights the need for prudence. You should really consider separate accounts, a yours, mine, and ours system. It's just smarter, financially." The same speech, word for word. The first time around, her words planted a seed of doubt. Not about Sarah, but about myself. She'd made me feel naive, irresponsible. She had positioned herself as the savvy older sister looking out for her hapless brother. But I knew the truth now. I knew that after Sarah left me, Linda had been the first one to call, not with sympathy, but with an offer. She offered to take the apartment off my hands for a fraction of its market value, framing it as a way to help me get back on my feet. And David, dear spineless David, had his eye on my car, the classic Mustang my father had left me. They weren't offering advice. They were vultures circling, measuring me from my coffin. "That's an interesting thought, Linda," I said, taking a sip of the bitter, overpriced wine. "I'll definitely think about it." She smiled, a tight, satisfied little smirk. She thought she was laying the foundation for her future windfall. She had no idea I was laying the foundation for her ruin. The next day, my boss, Mr. Peterson, called me into his office. The room was all dark wood and leather, designed to project an aura of power and permanence. Peterson himself was a relic from another era, a man in his late 60s with a folksy, paternal demeanor that concealed a shark's instincts. "Marcus, son, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the plush chair opposite his desk. He leaned forward, his expression a perfect mask of sympathy. "I hear there's some trouble at home. Your wife's brother?" This was the confidential chat. I remembered it vividly. It was the moment he began building his case to eliminate me. "It's a difficult time, sir," I said, playing the part of the beleaguered employee. I understand, he sighed, steepling his fingers. "Family is everything, but it can also be a distraction. We've got this big company restructuring coming up, as you know. I need my team focused, sharp." The first time, I had assured him of my dedication, promised my personal problems wouldn't affect my work. I was desperate to keep my job. The sole source of income Sarah hadn't yet managed to drain. It was useless. He had already made his decision. I knew now that Jake, my dear ailing brother-in-law, had been feeding Peterson a stream of lies for months. He'd told him I was unstable, distracted, looking for other jobs. Jake wanted my position. It came with a better salary, benefits, and a corner office, all things he felt entitled to. Peterson, eager to cut costs, saw an opportunity. He could fire me, a long-term employee with a higher salary, and hire Jake at a junior rate. He'd even get brownie points for hiring his friend's brother. "I'll do my best, Mr. Peterson," I said, letting my shoulders slump with faux defeat. "But you're right, it's a lot to handle." I was giving him the ammunition he thought he needed. He would document my lack of focus, my personal distractions. He would build a file to justify my termination. He didn't know I was building my own file, one that documented a conspiracy to commit wrongful termination and age discrimination. His plan wasn't just immoral, it was illegal, and I was going to make him pay for it. As if on cue, the wolves continued to gather. Sarah's mother, Eleanor, showed up at our apartment that evening. She was a small, bird-like woman whose fragility was a carefully constructed lie. She carried a tin of homemade cookies and a heart full of malice. "Oh, Marcus, you poor dear," she cooed, enveloping me in a cloud of lavender-scented hypocrisy. "Sarah told me everything. You're under so much stress." She bustled into the kitchen, placing the cookies on the counter. In my first life, I had eaten 3 of them while she poisoned my mind. They were delicious, buttery, and sweet, a perfect cover for the bitterness of her words. "I just want you to know, whatever happens, I'm here for you," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Marriages go through strains. Financial stress is the #1 killer of them." She patted my arm. "If things get difficult, I happen to know a very good divorce lawyer, a real shark. She helped my friend Carol through a nasty split, made sure she got everything she was entitled to." The same lawyer. The woman who had systematically dismantled my finances, placing liens on my assets, freezing my accounts, and burying me in legal fees until I had nothing left. Eleanor hadn't just known a lawyer. She had her on retainer, ready to be unleashed the moment Sarah gave the word. The entire family was in on it, a pack of hyenas waiting for the lion to weaken. The sweetness of the cookies turned to bile in my mouth. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, forcing a smile. "It's good to know we have options." Her eyes gleamed. She thought she was seeing the first cracks in the dam. The final piece of the inner circle fell into place on Thursday. Tom insisted we go for drinks at our usual dive bar. The place was grimy, smelled of stale beer and desperation, and was lit by the lurid red glow of a Budweiser sign. It was the perfect setting for his betrayal. We sat in our regular booth, a couple of whiskeys between us. He was supposed to be my best friend, the one I could tell anything, and I had. I'd told him about my fights with Sarah, my worries about money, my fears for the future. He had listened patiently, nodding and offering support, all while taking mental notes to pass along to the enemy. "You know, man," he said after his second shot, his words slightly slurred, "you gotta look out for yourself, too. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm." It was a line he'd used before, a classic from his playbook of feigned friendship. Then came the slip, the part of the script I'd forgotten until now. "I'm actually seeing someone new," he said, trying to sound casual. "It's getting kind of serious." "Oh yeah?" I asked, taking a slow sip of my whiskey, the cheap liquor burning a welcome trail down my throat. "Who is she?" He shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know her. Her name's Amy." Amy, of course, Sarah's sister. Divorced with 2 kids and a mortgage she couldn't afford. It all clicked into place. Tom wasn't just helping for a small cut. He was auditioning. He was trying to buy his way into the family, proving his loyalty by helping them fleece me. His reward would be Amy, and a piece of my life to build his own upon. Just as the realization settled, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Jake's on his way over. He wants to thank you in person. Be nice." The timing was impeccable. The whole cast was assembled. I looked at Tom, his face a mask of drunken sympathy. "Gotta go," I said, throwing a few bills on the table. "The man of the hour is making an appearance." I left him there, sitting in the red glow of the beer sign, a demon in his own private hell. I walked home, the cold night air doing little to cool the Arctic fury inside me. I arrived just as Jake was walking up to the door. He had his arm in a sling, a cheap prop that wouldn't fool a child. But he wore it with the confidence of a seasoned actor. He saw me, and his face lit up with a performance of profound gratitude. "Marcus!" he exclaimed, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Brother, I don't know what to say." He tried to hug me, a clumsy one-armed embrace. I sidestepped it. "Easy there," I said. "Don't want you to bust your stitches." He laughed, a sound that was all performance. He launched into his speech, tears welling in his eyes. He thanked me for saving his life, for being more of a brother to him than anyone, for the money. He swore on our family's honor that he would pay me back every single penny, with interest. The first time I heard this, I had felt a swell of pride. I had done the right thing. I had helped family. Now I just looked at him, at the fake sling, at the crocodile tears, at the man who, after the divorce was final and I was kicked out, moved into my apartment, slept in my bed, and used my money to fund his degenerate lifestyle. I clapped him on his good shoulder. "Don't worry about it, Jake," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's what family is for." He beamed, the picture of relief. Sarah watched from the doorway, her expression one of pure, unadulterated triumph. They had me. They had their fool. I smiled back at them. A ghost in my own home, surrounded by the people who had killed me. They couldn't see the ice in my eyes. They couldn't feel the winter in my heart. They thought the show was just beginning. They had no idea the final act had already been written, and I was the only one who knew how it ended. The morning mist clung to my windshield, blurring the grimy streets of the city into a watercolor of urban decay. I drove not to my office, but to a rundown building tucked away in a part of town most people avoided. The only sign on the door was a small brass plate that read, "R. Stone, Investigations." The air inside smelled of stale cigarettes, old paper, and a brand of dogged determination that money couldn't buy, but could certainly rent. My wedding ring clicked against the steering wheel as I parked, a steady, rhythmic tap like a countdown timer to justice. I took it off and slipped it into my pocket. It was no longer a symbol of love, but a piece of evidence. Rebecca Stone was a woman who looked like she'd been carved from granite and left out in the rain. Her face was a road map of hard-won battles, and her eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What's the problem?" she asked, her voice a low, gravelly hum as she lit a cigarette. I placed a briefcase on her desk and opened it. It contained the $10,000 I'd set aside from my emergency fund. "My wife is cheating on me. Her brother is a con artist faking an illness to get money from me. My best friend is helping them. My boss is conspiring to fire me illegally, and my sister and her husband are waiting to pick over the scraps." Rebecca took a long drag from her cigarette, her eyes never leaving mine. A slow, thin smile spread across her lips. "Well," she exhaled a plume of smoke. "That's a hell of a problem. What do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to document everything," I said, pushing the briefcase toward her. "I want photos, videos, audio recordings, financial records. I want Jake's fake injury proven. I want Tom's corporate espionage detailed. I want Sarah's affair with her yoga instructor Kevin on tape. I want indisputable, undeniable, life-destroying proof." She stubbed out her cigarette. "Consider it done," she said, not even glancing at the money. "My retainer is $10,000. This covers the first week." I nodded. "You'll have whatever else you need." I was buying ammunition for a war they didn't even know I was fighting. 2 days later, Sarah came to me with her brow furrowed in distress. It was phase 2 of the plan. "Marcus, Dr. Chen called again. There are complications from the surgery. He says Jake needs another procedure, something to do with an infection. They need another $5,000, or they won't do it." The first time, this news had sent a wave of panic through me. Our joint savings account was already wounded. This would be a mortal blow. I remembered the sleepless night, the frantic calculations, the feeling of drowning. This time I was ready. "Of course, honey," I said, my voice dripping with concern. I hugged her close, feeling the triumphant little tremor that ran through her body. "We'll get the money. Don't you worry." I went to the bank the next day. I withdrew the $5,000 from our joint savings, but before I handed it over to Sarah, I made a stop. I bought a small, high-fidelity audio recorder, the kind journalists use. That evening, I sat her down at the kitchen table. I placed the envelope of cash in front of her. "Sarah," I said, my voice gentle, "I'm scared. We're burning through our savings so fast. I need you to be honest with me. Is he really sick, or is this about something else?" I had the recorder running in my shirt pocket. It was a gamble, but I knew her arrogance. I knew she saw me as a simpleton, an emotional creature she could easily manipulate. She sighed, a dramatic, long-suffering sound. She took my hand. "Oh, Marcus, you're so sweet and naive." Her tone was condescending, a mother explaining the world to a slow child. "Okay, I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to get angry." I nodded, my face a mask of earnest trust. "It's not an infection," she admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Jake, he has some gambling debts, to some very dangerous people. This money is to pay them off. If he doesn't, they're going to hurt him, Marcus, really hurt him. I had to lie. I knew you wouldn't understand." Every word was a nail in her own coffin. I had it. Her confession, clear as a bell, recorded for posterity. The admission of fraud. The conspiracy. "I understand," I said, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I let her take the money. It was a small price to pay for the evidence I now possessed. At work, my own drama was unfolding. I played the part of the distracted, stressed-out husband to perfection. I let deadlines slip by a few hours. I sighed heavily in meetings. I let dark circles form under my eyes. Mr. Peterson watched me like a hawk, documenting every perceived failure, a smug look on his face. He thought I was unraveling. He had no idea I was weaving a net. Late one night, when the office was empty, I went to work. Tom had always been careless with his password, a simple combination of his dog's name and his birth year. I had it in under a minute. I accessed his computer and found what I was looking for: emails between him, Jake, and Peterson. They spelled out the entire conspiracy: Peterson's plan to restructure the department, Jake's application for my job submitted weeks ago, Tom's role in feeding Peterson negative performance reviews about me. I copied everything to a thumb drive. I also found something else, a little bonus. Tom, in his infinite greed, wasn't just helping to oust me. He was selling our company's client data to a competitor. He had a whole side hustle going, a brazen act of corporate espionage that would not only get him fired, but likely land him in prison. I now had the leverage to not only save my job, but to destroy the men who were trying to destroy me. The next day, I took a long lunch. I met with a labor attorney, a woman Rebecca had recommended. She was sharp, aggressive, and her eyes gleamed with a predatory light as I laid out my case. I played her Sarah's confession. I showed her the emails from Tom's computer. "Mr. Miller," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "This isn't just a wrongful termination case. This is a conspiracy to commit fraud, corporate espionage, and a clear-cut age discrimination suit against Mr. Peterson for trying to replace you with a younger, cheaper employee." She leaned back in her chair. "They are going to pay. They are going to pay so much." The plan was in motion. The pieces were moving, and the first domino was about to fall. Rebecca called me on Friday afternoon. "Package delivered," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I knew what it meant. She had sent her findings to Sarah's employer, the owner of the upscale yoga studio where Sarah was a part-time manager and her lover, Kevin, was a star instructor. The package contained a series of high-resolution photographs and a short video. They depicted Sarah and Kevin in various states of undress, using the studio's back storage room for their afternoon trysts. The video was particularly damning, capturing a conversation where they laughed about me, the gullible husband who was funding their romantic getaways. That evening, Sarah came home early. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and furious. She threw her purse on the floor. "Kevin got fired!" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Someone sent photos to the studio owner. Vile, disgusting photos. They're firing me on Monday. My friends, everyone knows. My life is ruined." She looked at me, expecting sympathy, expecting me to rage against the injustice of it all. I just looked back at her, my expression carefully neutral. "That's terrible," I said. "Who would do such a thing?" She stared at me, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes for the first time. But she couldn't conceive of it. Not me. Not her simple, loving, foolish Marcus. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. "I don't know," she sobbed, collapsing onto the sofa. "But my life is over." I walked over and sat beside her, putting a comforting arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, her body racked with sobs of self-pity. "It's okay," I whispered into her hair, my heart as cold as a tombstone. "We'll get through this together." She had no idea. This was just the beginning. Her life wasn't over. But the life she had planned, the one built on my ashes, had just been canceled. The steam from my black coffee fogged the window of the small cafe across the street from my office building. I had a perfect vantage point. It was Monday morning, the beginning of a week of reckonings. I watched as Tom strode toward the entrance, his walk a cocksure swagger, a man who believed he was on the cusp of a great victory. He was about to get his promotion, his girlfriend, his cut of my life. He was king of the world. Then his phone rang. I watched him press it to his ear. I saw his confident stride falter. He stopped dead on the sidewalk, his back stiffening. His free hand went to his head, his fingers digging into his hair. His face, even from this distance, was a mask of disbelief, slowly crumbling into pure, unadulterated panic. The call was from corporate security. They were informing him that his access had been revoked pending an investigation into irregularities in his computer logs. I had sent the thumb drive with the evidence of his espionage to the company's head of security via an anonymous courier service on Friday afternoon. I knew their protocol. They would lock him out, seize his equipment, and dismantle his digital life before he even had a chance to delete a single file. His kingdom was gone in the space of a 30-second phone call. I took another sip of my coffee. It was rich and bitter, the perfect taste for the moment. Tom's girlfriend, Amy, Sarah's sister, was about to find her new man's income stream had abruptly dried up. The mortgage on her house, the one Tom was supposed to help with, was now entirely her problem. The chain reaction had begun. The next target was Jake, my dear fraudulent brother-in-law. After getting the $5,000 from me, he'd grown bold. Rebecca's surveillance showed him at the racetrack, at high-stakes poker games, living large. His arm was miraculously healed, the sling disappearing whenever Sarah wasn't around. He was celebrating his victory over me. His creditors, however, were not the celebrating type. Rebecca had identified them, a small but notoriously vicious crew that operated out of a warehouse in the industrial district. On Monday evening, they received an anonymous tip. The tip included Jake's address, his daily routine, and a helpful note explaining that his ruptured appendix was a complete fabrication, and that he was, in fact, flush with cash. I was parked 2 blocks away from Jake's apartment building, listening via a long-range microphone Rebecca had provided. It was a toy for professionals, and it brought the sounds of Jake's destruction to me with perfect clarity. I heard the splintering of his apartment door. I heard the thud of fists against flesh. I heard his screams, not the fake theatrical cries he'd used on me, but the genuine, terrified screams of a man who had run out of lies. And I heard the sound of breaking furniture. His new flat-screen TV, probably bought with my money. His new sound system. They were taking their payment in kind. When they finally left, I heard Jake's whimpering sobs. The phantom pains of his fake surgery had been replaced by very real, very deserved agony. On Tuesday, the wave of destruction reached my sister. Linda and her husband David considered themselves untouchable, ensconced in their world of country clubs and cocktail parties. They looked down on me, on my simple life, on my modest income. But their lifestyle was built on a foundation of quiet corruption. David, a mid-level executive at an investment firm, was fond of passing along illegal stock tips to his wife, who would then make a series of small, savvy trades. It was their dirty little secret, the engine that powered their superiority complex. The Securities and Exchange Commission received a detailed, anonymous report that morning. It outlined a pattern of insider trading connected to David's firm, with Linda's investment portfolio as the primary example. The report included dates, trade volumes, and specific stocks, all information I had gleaned from conversations in their home over the years, details I had stored away without even realizing it. In my first life, it was just idle chatter. In this life, it was a weapon. The fallout was swift and public. An official investigation was launched. Their assets were frozen. The news, though not front page, was juicy enough to spread like wildfire through their social circle. Their country club membership was suspended. Friends stopped returning their calls. The whispers at the charity galas and tennis luncheons would be merciless. They hadn't lost their money yet, but they had lost something far more valuable to them: their reputation. Their carefully constructed world of social superiority was imploding. The contagion spread to the matriarch on Wednesday. Eleanor, the lavender-scented viper, prided herself on her position on the board of a prestigious local charity. It was her pedestal, the source of her moral authority in the community. From there, she judged the world, including me. But her position was also a source of income. A detailed audit, prompted by an anonymous letter from a concerned donor, revealed a pattern of financial discrepancies. Eleanor had been skimming from the donation funds for years, padding her own accounts under the guise of administrative costs and reimbursable expenses. It was the same money she had planned to use for Sarah's shark of a divorce attorney. Her removal from the board was quiet but absolute. There was no public scandal, just a polite, firm request for her resignation. But in her world, the absence of her name on the charity's letterhead was a social death sentence. Her friends on the board, the ones she lunched with every week, would know the truth. Her reign as the community's moral arbiter was over. She was no longer a benefactor. She was a thief. By Friday evening, the world that had conspired against me was in flames, and the smoke was drifting back to my own front door. Sarah came home looking like a ghost. The past week had shattered her. Her job was gone. Her lover was gone. Her social life was a smoking ruin. And now, her family was under attack from all sides. She found me in the living room reading a book. She sank onto the couch opposite me, her face a mess of confusion and despair. "It's happening to everyone, Marcus," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Tom got fired. Jake. Someone beat him up, badly. Linda and David are being investigated by the SEC. And my mother, she was forced to resign from the charity board." She stared at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading bewilderment. She was looking for an anchor in her storm, a logical explanation for the chaos that had descended upon her life, upon her family. "Why is this happening?" she cried, the tears finally coming, real tears of frustration and fear. "It's like we're cursed. It's like someone is doing this to us, trying to destroy us. Why? Who would be so cruel?" I put my book down. I looked at her, at the woman who had plotted my destruction with a smile on her face. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just a vast, cold emptiness. I went to her and knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in mine. I looked deep into her eyes, my expression a perfect facsimile of love and concern. "I don't know, my love," I whispered, my voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. "But don't you worry. I'm here. I'll take care of you. We'll face this together, you and I. No matter what, I will never leave your side." She collapsed against me, sobbing with relief. She believed me. She still believed in her fool. As I held her, stroking her hair, I felt the ice in my veins solidify into something unbreakable. The revenge was not yet complete. The final, most devastating blows were yet to come, and I would deliver them myself. The elevator ascended in expensive silence, a hermetically sealed box of brushed steel and recessed lighting, humming a quiet tune of wealth and power. It was a world away from the creaking, graffiti-scarred elevator in my own apartment building. As the car slowed, a chime, soft as a whisper, announced our arrival at the penthouse floor. Mr. Blackwood's assistant, a woman with a severe haircut and an even more severe suit, escorted me down a wide corridor toward a set of imposing mahogany doors. Doors I'd forgotten I had access to. Doors that opened not just to an office, but to a life I had deliberately abandoned. A world where I wasn't Marcus Miller, the beleaguered accountant. A world where I was Marcus Blackwood, the sole heir to a fortune that made the petty schemes of Sarah and her family look like children stealing pennies from a jar. The call had come 2 days ago, a jarring interruption to my carefully orchestrated revenge. The voice on the other end was clipped, British, and utterly unfamiliar. It was the Blackwood family attorney from London. "Mr. Blackwood," the voice had said, ignoring my legal name of Miller, which I'd taken after my mother remarried. "A friendly reminder that your inheritance trust, established by your late grandfather, became fully accessible upon your 35th birthday. That was last month." I was stunned into silence. My grandfather, a man I barely remembered, a titan of industry who had disapproved of my father's quiet academic life, had left me everything. In my first life, consumed by grief after my father's death and a fierce, youthful pride, I had rejected it all. I wanted to make my own way, to prove I didn't need the Blackwood name or its money. I had instructed the attorneys to manage the trust and not to contact me. I had forgotten about it, buried it under years of self-imposed mediocrity. It was the ultimate irony. I had died bankrupt while sitting on a fortune. "The current valuation of the trust," the attorney continued, oblivious to the earthquake he'd set off in my mind, "is approximately $50 million. We await your instructions." Now, sitting in a leather armchair that cost more than my car, the scent of aged brandy and old books filling the air, the full weight of this revelation settled upon me. Across the vast desk sat Arthur Vance, my grandfather's oldest friend and former business partner. He was a man in his 80s, with eyes that still held the sharp, predatory glint of a lifelong corporate raider. "Your grandfather would be amused," Arthur said, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. He slid a folder across the polished desk. "He always said you had his blood in you, even if you tried to deny it. He knew you'd come back to it eventually." I opened the folder. It was a portfolio of the trust's assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, and one holding that made the brandy taste impossibly sweet. "That's right," Arthur said, noticing my expression. "The trust holds a 60% controlling interest in Peterson Consolidated Enterprises. My boss, Mr. Peterson. The man who was currently building a case to fire me, the man who thought he held my future in his hands. He wasn't my boss, I was his. The sheer, beautiful, poetic justice of it was breathtaking. My grandfather, from beyond the grave, had handed me the ultimate weapon." Rebecca Stone arrived at the penthouse an hour later. She looked as out of place in the opulent surroundings as a crow in a cage of canaries, but she wore her discomfort like a suit of armor. She placed a final, thick manila folder on the desk. "It's all there," she said, her work complete. "Jake's complete medical records from a source at his clinic showing no sign of appendicitis, ever. A full breakdown of Tom's espionage network, including encrypted chats with his contact at the rival firm. A detailed timeline of Sarah's year-long affair with Kevin, complete with hotel receipts she paid for from our joint account. And sworn affidavits from 2 of Linda's friends detailing how she and David conspired to manipulate the divorce proceedings to their benefit, in exchange for a cut. The folder was heavier than gold. It was the complete narrative of their betrayal, documented, verified, and weaponized. I spent the next hour with the Blackwood attorneys. I signed papers with a steady hand, my signature a series of cold, sharp angles. The first document transferred ownership of Peterson Consolidated Enterprises to a private management firm, with a new board of directors appointed by me. My instructions were simple and irrevocable. The second document authorized my legal team to pursue full criminal and civil charges against Thomas Miller for corporate espionage and against Jacob Vance for fraud. The third gave my divorce attorney, a man who truly was a shark, everything he needed to flay Sarah and her family alive in court. By the time I left the penthouse, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and blood. The dominoes weren't just falling anymore. I had dropped an anvil on them from a skyscraper. Sarah found me in my study that night. It wasn't our study anymore. During the day, movers had come. The cheap IKEA furniture was gone. In its place were pieces from the Blackwood estate, a heavy oak desk, leather-bound books lining the walls, and a large, ornate globe that spun silently in the corner. She came home to find our joint accounts legally frozen, a notice from the bank citing an ongoing investigation into fraudulent transactions. She had tried to call her mother, her sister, Tom. None of them answered. Their own worlds were burning to the ground. She entered the study, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. She stopped dead, staring at the transformation. She looked at the new furniture, at the legal documents spread across my desk. Then she saw the photos. On the wall, where a cheap print of a Parisian street used to hang, were framed pictures she had never seen. A photo of me as a boy in a crisp boarding school uniform, standing next to a man with a hard, powerful face, my grandfather. A photo of me at a university graduation, not from the state college I'd told her about, but from Oxford. A photo of me at a charity gala, shaking hands with a senator, my name on the banner behind us. Marcus Blackwood. Her mind, which had been reeling from the chaos of the week, finally shattered. The world she knew, the man she thought she knew, dissolved in front of her eyes. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. "What is this? Who are you?" I looked up from my papers, my face calm, my eyes holding no warmth, no recognition of the woman who had shared my bed for 7 years. I gave her the truth, the final, killing blow. "My name," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice, "is Marcus Blackwood, and you and your entire family have just made the gravest mistake of your lives." She stared at me, the comprehension dawning in her eyes, a slow, horrifying sunrise of revelation. She hadn't married a fool. She had married a king who had chosen to live as a pauper, and she had tried to rob him. Her house of cards, built on a foundation of lies and my feigned weakness, was finally, irrevocably, gone. All that was left was the reckoning. The courthouse steps were slick with an icy October rain, the gray sky weeping a miserable drizzle that mirrored the state of my former life. I stood under the shelter of the grand portico, my suit jacket unbuttoned, feeling nothing of the chill. The divorce was final. It had not been a negotiation. It had been an execution. Armed with Rebecca's evidence and the full might of the Blackwood legal team, we had systematically dismantled every claim, every lie, every attempt to secure a piece of my fortune. Sarah was left with nothing but her own debts and the public humiliation of her exposed affair and fraud. I saw her approaching from the street, a lone figure moving against the tide of bustling lawyers and clerks. Her designer heels, likely purchased with the last of some borrowed money, clicked a desperate, unsteady rhythm on the wet stone. She had lost weight, a gauntness clinging to her features that wasn't there before. She looked broken. For a moment, a phantom echo of my old pity surfaced, but I crushed it without a second thought. Pity was a luxury I could no longer afford. "Marcus," she said, her voice thin and reedy as she stopped in front of me. Raindrops clung to her hair, tracing paths down her pale cheeks like tears. Her apology was rehearsed, a string of words about being foolish, lost, and manipulated by her family. But for the first time, the tears that followed seemed real. They were not tears of strategic sorrow, but of genuine, absolute loss. "I know what I did was unforgivable," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the ground. "But I loved you, Marcus. I did. I lost my way. I never knew about your money. I swear it. If I had known—" "If you had known," I finished for her, my voice flat and devoid of emotion, "you would have played the long con instead. You would have been the perfect, devoted wife, waiting for the right moment to take everything, not just the scraps you were aiming for. She flinched as if struck. No, that's not true. Isn't it? I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw only a stranger. You didn't love me, Sarah. You loved the idea of me. You loved my weakness, my distrust, my willingness to be your safety net. The moment that was gone, so was your love. I took a step back. Goodbye, Sarah. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the rain, her quiet sobs lost in the noise of the city. Tom managed to get a meeting. He was escorted to my new office, the one that used to be Mr. Peterson's, by 2 imposing security guards. He looked like a wraith. The cocksure swagger was gone, replaced by the stooped posture of a defeated man. He was facing criminal charges and a civil suit from the company that would bankrupt him 10 times over. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice was a desperate rasp. Marcus, please. I'll do anything. I'll testify against Sarah, against Jake, against Linda. I'll tell them everything. Just call off the company's lawyers. Give me a deal. I can't go to prison. I listened impassively, letting the silence stretch after he finished his pathetic plea. He had been my best friend. We had grown up together. I had trusted him with every secret, every vulnerability. He had taken that trust and sold it for a pittance. I opened a drawer in the mahogany desk and pulled out a single business card. I slid it across the polished surface toward him. He looked down at it, his brow furrowed. "What's this?" he asked. "The best bankruptcy attorney in the city," I said. "You're going to need him." His face crumpled. Hope vanished, replaced by a raw, hollow despair. Security escorted him out, a shell of the man who had swaggered into the building just a week before. Jake ambushed me in the lobby of my penthouse. He didn't try to get past security. He just waited, leaning against a marble pillar, looking pathetic. His real injuries, courtesy of his creditors, were on full display now. A fading black eye, a split lip that had just healed, and a very genuine limp. The fake sling was gone, replaced by the hard-earned damage of his own stupidity. "Marcus," he said, his voice thick with a humility he'd never known before. He swallowed his pride, the effort visible in the bob of his Adam's apple. I'm sorry, for everything. I was an idiot. I messed up." He looked around the opulent lobby, his eyes wide with the scale of the world he'd tried to swindle. "I'll pay you back," he pleaded. "Every penny. I'll get a job, 2 jobs. I'll work my whole life to make it right. Just call off your dogs. These guys, they're going to kill me." I looked at him, at the personification of a lifetime of bad choices and selfish desires. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had been a key player in the conspiracy to ruin my life, all for his own gain. "The people you owe money to aren't my dogs, Jake," I said, my voice cold. "They're your problem. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." I nodded to the doorman. "See that this man doesn't enter the building again." Jake's face went slack with shock as the doorman firmly took his arm. He had expected me to be his savior one last time. He was finally learning that some saviors run out of patience. The family meeting was Linda's idea, a desperate, last-ditch effort. I agreed to meet them at their house, the one that now had a foreclosure notice taped to the front door. The grand rooms were filled with moving boxes and the ghosts of their former lives. David sat on a packed crate, his face gray, his breathing shallow. Linda's face was blotchy from crying, her expensive clothes looking out of place amidst the disarray. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Linda began, her voice trembling. She launched into a frantic, sobbing appeal. She talked about their children, about their private school tuition they could no longer afford. She talked about David's heart condition, exacerbated by the stress of the investigation. She talked about family, about loyalty, about how we were blood, and that had to mean something. I listened from the doorway, my arms crossed, my expression unmoved. They had never treated me like family. They had treated me like a resource to be exploited, a fool to be pitied and plucked. Their pleas for loyalty now were as hollow as the moving boxes that surrounded them. "Family loyalty, Linda?" I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. "Was it loyal to advise me to open separate accounts so you could get my apartment for a steal after Sarah left? Was it loyal for your husband to use illegal stock tips to fund this lifestyle while looking down on me for my honest work?" Their faces went white. They hadn't realized I knew the specifics of their treachery. "Your problems are not my problems," I finished, my voice like the closing of a vault door. "You built this life on lies. Now you can watch it fall." I turned and walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. My final visit was to Eleanor. She was in an assisted living facility now, a state-funded one that smelled of disinfectant and despair. The scandal had cost her everything: her home, her friends, her health. She had aged years in just a few months. She was frail, her bird-like body lost in the stiff sheets of the hospital-style bed. I brought her flowers, a bouquet of bright, cheerful daisies that looked garish in the bleak room. She looked up as I entered, her eyes clouded with cataracts and regret. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle. She reached a trembling hand toward me. "My boy." I took her hand. It was cold and papery. "You have to forgive them," she pleaded, her breath catching. "Forgive us. Your parents. They were good people. They would want you to show mercy. Family is all we have in the end." I looked at this woman, my grandmother, who had offered me cookies while planning to feed me to a legal shark. She had been the matriarch of this viper's nest, sanctioning and encouraging their every betrayal. Her appeal to my dead parents was the final, most desperate manipulation. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was cold, like marble. "My parents would have wanted me to be happy and safe, Eleanor," I said softly, my lips close to her ear. "They would not have wanted me to be a doormat for a family of predators." I stood up, my voice still a whisper, but one that carried the weight of absolute finality. Some betrayals are unforgivable. Some wounds don't heal just because you want them to. Rest well. I placed the flowers on her bedside table and walked out of the room, leaving the scent of daisies and decay behind me. The reckoning was over. Every debt had been called in. Every villain had received their due. I was finally, completely free. 5 years later, the Mediterranean sun painted golden ribbons across the yacht's deck. The sea was a startling shade of blue, so clear I could see the shadows of fish darting deep below. I sipped my espresso, the rich, dark flavor a familiar comfort, and watched a pod of dolphins dance in our wake. They leaped from the water, sleek bodies arcing against the morning sky. A perfect picture of untroubled joy. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, a soft, insistent vibration. I glanced at the screen. It was another email from a name I barely recognized anymore. Another desperate plea from a ghost of a life I had long since abandoned. I had learned over the years to ignore them. Their desperation was a prison of their own making, and I refused to be their warden or their visitor. They had mistaken my absence for eventual forgiveness, my silence for a door left ajar. They were wrong. The door was closed, locked, and the key was at the bottom of this beautiful, deep blue sea. I stood and walked to the rail, leaning against it as the warm breeze ruffled my hair. Life was different now. It was quiet. It was real. I was no longer Marcus Miller, the haunted accountant, or Marcus Blackwood, the vengeful heir. I was just Marcus. My new wife, Elena, found me there. She was a marine biologist, a woman with sun-kissed skin, a brilliant mind, and eyes that held the same depth and wonder as the ocean she studied. She knew nothing of my past when we met at a coral reef restoration project in the Red Sea. I was just a quiet, philanthropic donor, and she was the passionate scientist leading the charge. Our love had grown organically, rooted in shared passions and mutual respect, uncomplicated by greed or manipulation. Her love felt clean. She slid her arm around my waist and rested her head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft. "Just how beautiful it is," I said, and I meant it. Not just the sea or the sun, but the peace. The profound, unshakable peace I had fought so hard to find. Later that day, in my home office overlooking the Aegean Sea, I reviewed the quarterly reports from my charitable foundation. I had funneled a significant portion of the Blackwood fortune into it. The irony was not lost on me that the very money Sarah and her family had conspired to steal was now being used for its intended, albeit karmic, purpose. The report detailed a new wing being funded for a children's hospital, specializing in complex pediatric surgeries. Children who actually needed it were getting the help Jake had only pretended to require. The thought brought me a quiet, satisfying peace. A circular justice that had long since replaced the bitter taste of revenge. A video call came in from Rebecca Stone. She was no longer a private investigator working out of a grimy office. She was now my global head of security, a position she filled with ruthless efficiency. We spoke a few times a year, brief check-ins to ensure the walls I had built around my new life remained secure. "Just a routine update," she said, her face as impassive as ever on the screen. "All quiet on the Western Front?" She briefly shared her screen. A surveillance summary I never asked for, but which she provided anyway. It was a series of recent, candid photos of my former tormentors. Sarah, working as a receptionist at a dental office, looking tired and worn. Jake, gaunt but clean, leaving a rehab facility. Tom, in a cheap uniform, driving for a food delivery service, his face set in a permanent scowl. Linda, her hands raw and red, cleaning a house in a wealthy suburb she used to live in. And Eleanor, a final photo of her name on a small, simple headstone in a state-funded cemetery. I felt nothing. Not joy, not pity, not even a flicker of interest. They were characters from a book I had read a long time ago. Their story was over. "Thank you, Rebecca," I said. "Send my best to your family." She gave a curt nod, and the screen went blank. Justice had been served, cold and complete, and in its place, a quiet life had grown. My phone buzzed one last time. It was an unopened email forwarded by my attorney's office, a filter for the ghosts. The sender was one of Linda's children, a young woman now asking for help with her college tuition. She wrote of her parents' mistakes, of her own dreams, of the family connection she hoped still meant something. In my early days of freedom, these requests had tormented me. The pull of old obligations, the phantom weight of inherited guilt. But I had learned a crucial lesson. I could not save them from the consequences of their parents' actions without sacrificing my own peace. It was not my burden to carry. I deleted the email without opening it. Elena came into the office, holding 2 glasses of wine. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Come watch the sunset with me," she said. I shut my laptop. The world of quarterly reports and security updates vanishing with a click. I took the glass she offered and followed her out to the terrace. The sky was on fire. The sun, a great, bleeding heart sinking into the sea, painting the water in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and gold. It was a canvas of infinite possibility, no longer a reflection of a life fueled by revenge, but the promise of a future defined by love. We stood together, watching the day end, ready for the quiet beauty of a new one to begin.